So, I'm Pete Buckney. My Christmas story kind of starts today. I had a Christmas lunch with someone today. One of my clients is going through a bit of a reorganisation. We've had 5 years of really working completely in a not over the wall kind of way, and it looks like we might be at a stage where we need to grow really fast. So this guy who's on the management team was asking me what's important to me, thinking, am I going to talk about my package that I need or other things like this? And so my answer to him was no, it's really about culture. And he wanted to know what I meant by that. I should say, actually, so what I'm going to talk about is, should we involve experts in design? I find I get some quite strong views on this about some people really feeling we shouldn't let non-technical people get involved in design at all. But we'll come on to that. So back to this lunch. I've raised a few things about what culture meant to me, but one of the main ones was getting cross-fertilisation, having diversity, taking people from different domains and different experiences, and it's when you actually get them overlapping that's where the magic happens. So I think we quite often get this wrong. We tend to try and put people in to bridge the communication gap, and here's a little agile superhero that I found, but quite often we try and put people in between the domains. Early in my career, I used to continuously have this role, but it's not really where the magic happens. It's where the handovers happen. And I mean, as we talked about today already, we know what happens when you have handovers. We hand the work over to you, you do something else with it, you hand it back again, it's not right, and it's where the rework happens, it's where the blame and the lack of trust and everything else happens. So really for culture, we want to get back to where we are actually working together in this space in the middle. And well, sad to say, actually, in this lunch, we were then working on talking about what would be the next killer demo. And I said, well, let's work together on that. He said, okay, I'll draft something and send it across to you, and you can send it back to you. Look, no, let's actually sit down and spend an hour together on it. Okay, let me do a draft first. And so I've got some work to do there. But yeah, this got me thinking, it's just in the last couple of weeks, it's really been bubbling up for me. Do I actually want to start a hashtag no handovers? But it turns out there already is one, and there was the first thing I found looking for this was quite a nice little DevOps thing from Anders Lundsgaard. So, but yeah, so this got me thinking again, what is it that really makes me tick about software, and what's been a continuing theme in my career? And a really big thing is actually changing the world. I'm not happy just making the software, doing the things that are within our control. I'm only really happy when we succeed in doing the things that we're trying to influence and achieving the real world change. And the kind of continuous theme, particularly in the first 10 years of my career, I used to be that person who did the handover. What I do much more in, say, the last 15 years is get the various experts directly in touch with the discovery, design, and delivery of the solution. And so this is kind of my mission statement, that bridging the communication gap isn't ambitious enough. We really need to get people involved directly. So I did a talk at BDDX a couple of weeks ago where I really went into how to get experts involved in the discovery phase. So that's a bit big for a lightning talk, so I'm going to skip ahead from that. But for the delivery phase, the thing that I like to talk about is continuous acceptance, and it's really about taking whoever it is who most needs to understand the bit of the work that gets done, and working directly with them. A really common thing for me is is using the language of examples rather than rules. So work with them to capture what we're trying to do with real-world examples, to draw, to model, to use all kinds of different thinking tools, and then build the test together, with the aim that as soon as I've done a commit, I know it's already accepted by the domain experts because we've worked together on those tests. So this is kind of where we come into thinking about design. So what I'll tend to do is give the domain expert a small chunk of the system that can be viewed as a system under test, and we're going to work together on working out first of all, working out what the outputs of this little chunk are that we need to achieve our outcomes, and then how we're going to drive it. And so all our conversations are about working out what functionality we're interested in, and the language of examples around that. And this was a tweet from that Price that made me think maybe I was onto something. I mean, in the BDD community, we talk a lot about tools like Cucumber and so on, and everything's in given, when, then language. And it doesn't seem to me to be a particularly useful tool for getting users really to understand chunks of the system. So he likes to understand how they represent the domain. And the best examples from one of my friends and former colleagues, he was trying to do a BDD type approach, getting the users involved in thinking about the specification for the system in test terms at a new law company, and it just wasn't working. He was doing everything in given, when, then language for the tests. And then he suddenly thought, how do these lawyers work at the moment? They have a brown book with all the rules, legal rules of all the jurisdictions in the world. And he thought, how about if I can present the test data so that it looks just like their brown book? And suddenly it started working. He started having this magic happening. So once you got this kind of approach, the question is how does this really influence our design? And for me, well, the first thing, should we get domain experts in design? There's a few things we definitely shouldn't do. One of them is doing your kind of drawing diagrams type designing with domain experts. Having non-technical people involved in that tends to be awful, and particularly if you let them get involved in naming. But I think it works the other way around as well. If you let technical people start choosing names for business things, it's just as bad. But I suspect most of you have probably seen hexagonal architecture, ports and adapters architecture, where we can build. It's normally represented as our whole domain, but we can build pluggable interfaces that we can plug all our external dependencies into and replace those with test harnesses. I think it's not normally done like this, but I like to divide even further into the system. So this was something for a training course, but it's representing a cache point machine, and we can separate the system into multiple hexagons. And if all I'm interested in is testing the transaction engine, I can plug test harnesses into it and mock out dependencies and test it in isolation. So for me, the kinds of I wouldn't want to get a domain expert involved in drawing that diagram. I would want to talk to them about where are you interested in knowledge about the system. So this is a bit of a horrible thing. I don't know how easy it will be to see, but this is one of the first times I ever did this. This is about 18 years ago, but I was working on a really complex value at risk system, and we had a specification document that said what it needed to do, and a bunch of test specs that said what it needed to do. But the whole thing was just a black box. Nobody could see inside it. There was one developer who thought he knew what the code did. And so I built this spreadsheet that actually modeled everything it needed to do. But where the domain experts come in, every one of these areas that's outlined in blue, there's about 18 tabs of this stuff as well to represent this whole system. I can show you later, but every one of them you can just highlight that range, copy and paste into Notepad, and that will give you a tab delimited format. And I just insisted that the developers make it possible to either get the data out of the system or put the data in, kind of peek or poke any one of these bits of data into the system as you went. And all of a sudden we got a way that the domain experts could finally understand the calculation that was going on, and they could verify any small part of it that it really was behaving in the way the spreadsheet worked. The problem we had with this, we were building this big Java system. When they saw this spreadsheet, they just said, why do we need the Java system? Can we have the spreadsheet, please? And in the end, they did launch their business with the spreadsheet because the Java system wasn't ready. Yeah, I mean, more often now well, the tool I use most now is Postman with my current users, because they're very happy working with JSON. So, I mean, this is just something I was doing earlier. It's a bit hard to see, isn't it? But having a tool that can just let you poke bits of JSON into any aspect of the system, almost anything where we want to break things down, then with my current experts, we take this approach. So what this really does is they tell me where they're interested in seeing data moving about in the system, and I build the interfaces at that point. And design for me is anything that avoids the big ball of mud or the black box where you can only see the system from outside. They're not telling me where classes are or APIs. They're just telling me the kind of big important business pieces where you're interested in seeing data. And so for me, the answer is yes, we can get them involved in design by asking that question, and we absolutely should. And that's it. So any questions afterwards? Thank you.